Yesterday, Statistician-General Dr Pali Lehohla released what can only be described as shocking statistics. Poverty rates in South Africa have increased, meaning that 55% or 31 million South Africans are poor or live in poverty. Also, female-headed households remain significantly poorer than male-headed households. To unpack this and more, his report on poverty trends in the country, Statistician-General Pali Lehohla joins us from our Hatfield studios in Pretoria. Doctor, thanks so much for being with us and welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, listeners. I suppose we have to digest these poverty numbers, so said someone, and I thought, oh my God, what a word to choose to digest poverty.
Yeah, it's not a nice word to digest, and I think the numbers yesterday, we could describe them as shocking. I, however, describe them as exceptionally sad. When we talk, let's get into it very quickly. When we talk about poverty, what are you saying? How do we define poverty from your perspective?
There are two definitions globally that define poverty. The one level is how you measure it in terms of money, the ability to buy goods and services. And you have several lines that determine this or define it. So you have food poverty, you have the upper line, which gives you an indication as to food and other things. And then there is another measurement of poverty, which has to deal with multidimensionality of poverty, where things like housing, water, electricity, and sanitation, the facilities around you, define poverty. That's how we define that.
Yeah.
The report deals with both. It deals with both money metric poverty, where we have three poverty lines. One as of 2017, adjusted by inflation, to the upper line being 1,132, the lower line being 441 rands, which is the poverty line.
Yeah, I think that
now looking at those lines.
Yeah. Please continue.
The upper line, which is 1,130. 55.5% or 30 million people in South Africa, 31 million people in South Africa, live below that line. The poverty line, about 12.5 million people live in that below food poverty line. And this is the kind of situation that we have in South Africa. What is more critical is the fact that that is actually increasing. Whereas there were gains from 2001 to 2011, we see a return of poverty by 2015. And where we are now in 2016 and 2017, with two successive negative growth, where unemployment is actually sticky upwards, all those things do not portend well for where we are today. And of course, the downgrades always remain a threat.
Yeah.
And therefore, one expects to see poverty going forward because of the signals that we have already in the system.
All right. While you get your phone, let me move on to the next point, because there's a lot to get through on this one, and I think I'm actually going to jump straight to the education, because I know that you highlighted this as one of the major problems here, and perhaps one of the solutions to getting out of it. There's a big note that says 3 in 4 people with no or some primary education are poor, compared to 1 in 10 with a higher education. Now, education always seems to get the biggest crux of the budget, and yet education is the biggest problem in our country, or the lack thereof. What are we doing wrong? Why are we losing the battle when it comes to educating South Africans, which they deserve to be?
Well, I mean, the evidence is very clear. It's always been clear. The problem is the bridge out of poverty is education. You can build so many RDP houses, you can provide electricity, you can provide water, until people can do things for themselves. And the only way they can is when the brain is fed with solutions.
Yeah.
They have the ability to solve their problems. So we have not cracked that. And unfortunately, to the extent that we have not cracked that problem up to now, it is going to eat back in the assets that have been built. So basically, we face a very difficult situation in terms of corroding the gains that have been made in the past. And the data shows it that the way people progress through education, it's increasingly a declining one.
Yeah, yeah.
Although the absolute numbers are increasing, but proportionately it's increasingly declining. So it is eating into the capital that has been made instead of the interest.
Yeah.
So this is the dilemma that we have, and education is obviously key to solving the problems.
Yeah, it is key. We know this, and yet it doesn't seem to be happening. I mean, we talk about growth in this country, and it's estimated that obviously growth target 5.4% per year. This is not even nearly happening. I mean, we've had 2 negative quarters. We're in a technical recession. So, in other words, what you have reported here, focusing on this poverty report, it's only going to get worse.
Oh, well, I mean, if you look at this report, is as of 2015, and subsequent to that, we have had downgrades. We have had 2 negative growth rates in the economy. We are having the highest unemployment in the quarters, fourth quarter of 2016 and the first quarter, or rather the first quarter of 2017 and the second quarter of 2017. So, and there are retrenchment online. So you can't expect a miracle.
Yeah.
So poverty is going to deepen.
Yeah, it is.
And then the education outcomes are not that great. We have well, I do not know whether they will, but the material conditions and the material that is feeding into the system do not point to a lowering of poverty. I'll report on that when we next measure.
When we talk about the National Development Plan, and I mean, on paper it looks amazing, and you yourself admitted to it and alluded to it yesterday, just saying that the goal is great, but we're not moving in that direction, and what we're doing is not having a look at how we create jobs, how we get people out of this current situation that we find ourselves in. Why is it? Why is the government lacking the ability to create sustainable jobs to enrich the people of South Africa?
I don't think our technocrats know how to plan. I mean, I don't know how to plan myself, let me declare that. But I know how to compile statistics. And I do quite a good job at it. And in that, we do things called the supply and use tables, the input-output tables. And we do that to measure the quality of the data that we produce. Based on that, the Russians at the time had a person by the name of Leontief who migrated to the US. And we have something called Leontief input-output tables. And using those, and those have become the standard in your planning systems, the rock bait. We don't use that in South Africa, and you can't expect a miracle. Anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
And those things are input and output tables that we use as a matter of course to measure the quality of the gross domestic product.
Yeah. All right.
And if we don't progress that into a planning system, we cannot really know whether the programs that we are having, whether Peter is not robbing Paul in the process of doing things.
2 more questions.
And you need that technical team that deals with that work.
Absolutely. 2 more questions I need to get through before the news. I want to look at social grants, because it's unbelievable that from 2000 there were 3 million South Africans on social grants. Now, sitting with these reports, 2015, that figure has jumped up to over 17 million. And you've got, beg your pardon, so many South Africans that are entirely dependent on living on social grants as opposed to earning money in a job in a sustainable way. The state can't continue like this, can it? It
can't, but it should, unfortunately, because otherwise it will be subjecting people to such abject poverty that things will not be manageable. Social grants are very helpful because they tend to deal with matters of poverty very, very directly. If we don't deal with that, there will be serious problems. But what we need is growth. What we need is people who get with skills to do the work. Social grants are a bridge to attaining that. Yeah. But if we do not deal with education as a rock bait of possibilities of getting out of this, we are not going to get out of this. Korea focused on this. Yeah. After the Japanese oppressed them as South African whites regimes oppressed black people.
Yeah.
We didn't do that.
Yeah. Just
so if we can't get education right, and also we have lost the waves of demographic potential. We have lost 2-3 waves. Yeah. So the problem is much deeper than that. I'm afraid the problem is much, much deeper than what we tend to see.
Yeah.
And it's going to deepen because of the demographic implications of this, of an aging population or elderly population that can't do anything for itself, and the young population that has not been enabled to even take care of the aging population. The question is, what are we going to do with those who are not yet born? That's really the question.
That's the big problem. It's 7 o'clock here on Morning Live, and I know that this is our big story in the news bulletin, so my last final question to you as we enter into news time. This is scary. 3 out of every black South Africans are poor. That number is a very difficult number to digest. 3 out of every 5 black South Africans are living in poverty. I mean, this is a figure that should have gotten better, should have turned around, and yet it's getting worse. And we look at the circumstances surrounding every South African here. Everything is increasing, and yet the money is decreasing that individuals are earning. What do we need to do, Dr. Lehohla? What do we need to do?
I don't think there is a clear end in sight in relation to that fact, that the majority population, in fact, is 3 out of everyone, and we don't see education inroads in there. I mean, if you look at the quarterly labor force surveys, they are telling a very difficult story, that the numbers of people that are unemployed. So you have poverty, which is a child, has the face of a child. You have unemployment, which has the face of a youth. Now, you can see that people graduate from poverty into unemployment, and then they go and reproduce poverty. And the majority of these are black. So there is an industry of reproduction of poverty, and the demographics are against us.
All right, we leave it there for this morning. Dr. Pali Lehohla talking to us about the stats that were released. This, of course, one of our big news stories. We'll give you more on that in a short while. He was joining us from our Pretoria studios. In other